Let's take a breath together. Wow. We've been talking about service this month. Passionate service, not just plain old service. We're talking about passionate service. And how when we are doing that which is our passion, we are tapping into source. We're tapping into source because that's where our passion comes from. And so when we're serving with passion, then our service has such a deeper meaning because it's service of the soul, service from the soul. Howard Thurman says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, because the world needs people who come alive. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, because the world needs people who have come alive. And so that's what passion is all about. It's about coming alive. It's about being alive. And when we serve from that place, then, wow, look out, world, because that's how change begins to happen. We've been talking about service and how service is a unifier, how service is that which brings us together. We distinguishing service from helping. Helping tends to separate because helping has a hierarchy. The helper generally feels superior, is in some ways superior to the one being helped or the ones being helped. And that's a separator. When we look at what we do, whatever it is, even though it may seem like helping, when we look at it as service, then that's when we can move to that place of oneness, to that place of the allness and the fullness of God that is always ever present wherever we are, whatever we're doing, however we're serving. So we start to look at how can I serve rather than how can I help. And speaking of how can I help, I had recommended a book in the bookstore by Ram Dass and Paul Gorman, and it's entitled How Can I Help? But it's really talking about service, because oftentimes we think of helping and service as the same thing, and he's using those terms interchangeably in the book because he talks a lot about service, yet he talks about helping also. But here we're talking about service. How can I serve? When we find ourselves in those kinds of situations that are difficult, those situations that are challenging, those situations that aren't working for us, challenging situations with our families, with ourselves, with our spouses, with our employers, employees, whatever the situation may be, if we can stop for a minute and just take a breath and say, how can I serve in this situation? How can I serve in this moment? How can I allow God to show up through me, as me in this moment? Because that's what service is all about also. And so that takes me into the topic for today. It is, who's serving? Who's serving? That's a twofold question, who's serving? Because often we think that we're the ones doing the serving. And because we think that we're the ones doing the serving, we get caught up in a lot of things. Like last week we talked about excuses for why we can't serve. I don't know enough, I can't do enough, I don't have that kind of talent, I don't have enough time, or whatever the case may be. We find reasons why we can't serve when we think that we're the ones doing the serving. And I'll remind you of something I said last week, that God doesn't always call the equipped, but God always equips the called. God doesn't always call the equipped, but God always equips the called. And so when we get caught up in whether we are the ones doing the serving and whether we are the ones who have to know everything, we have to remember God always equips the called. That reminds me of what I told you a few weeks ago about not ever wanting a church, that I didn't ever want a church, that I had been saying that for 22 years. And you know, when there's something that God has for us to do, then whatever it is we need, whatever it is we need to know, whatever it is we need to do, God knows how to do it. And all we have to do is just show up. Just show up. Be willing to show up. And so in showing up, we are letting down our defenses. We're letting down our comfort zone. We're letting down those things that would hold us back. We're just opening ourselves up. And I talked last week about use me, about allowing God to use us and using what's in our hands. But I'm also reminded of a hymn that was sung in my mother's church in my childhood, "Have Thine Own Way, Lord." I see some nods. So all of you haven't always been religious scientists. Have Thine own way, Lord. Have Thine own way, Lord. Have Thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after Thy will, while I am waiting, yielded and still. Have Thine own way, Lord. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after Thy will. Do you know that when we show up surrendered, when we show up open, when we show up willing, when we show up saying yes, then we have created a space for God to work. We have created a space for God to show up in and through and as our lives. And whatever it is we feel like we're lacking, God will mold us. God will make us into that which we need to be, so that there's an opening and a space for God to work, for God to be all that it wants to be in whatever situation we find ourselves. And so finding myself in this position right here today, in this past year, God has molded me and continues to mold me into whatever it is God wants me to do, because I find myself doing some things like, I didn't know I knew how to do that. Didn't know I knew that particular thing. Or whatever it is, but it's not about me. It's not about me. So when we start to look at who's serving, when we come to realize that when we are really in that place of oneness, when we are really in that place of surrender, when we are really in that place of wanting to be all that we can be and allow God to be all that it can be in and through and as our lives, then God shows up. God shows up because we've created a space, because we have showed up. When we show up, then God shows up, because there's somewhere for God to show up, some space through which God can come. So when I'm looking at who's serving, God is serving. That's what we always want to keep in mind. When we keep in mind that God's serving, we also recognize we're not using our own energy. We're not using our own know-how. We don't have to get burnt out. We don't have to get tired out, because we tap into that energy that is endless, that is without limit. We tap into that energy that is ever flowing, and just be open enough to allow it to ever flow through each and every one of us. And when we get into that place of oneness, because oneness is about as us. Yes, God works in us. Yes, God works through us. But when God works as us, that's what oneness is all about. And so when we serve from that place of oneness, when we serve from that as us consciousness, also known as Kingdom 4 for people who have followed the Beckwith 4 Kingdoms for years, that's what oneness is about. Being in a place of service, being in a place of openness, being in a place of willingness, being in a place of surrender, so that God can show up as us in whatever situation we may find ourselves. So I invite you to breathe with me right now. When we are in that place of knowing that God is the doer, that God is the server, then we can begin to move out of our comfort zones more easily, and we begin to recognize that in looking at who's serving even more, we think about how much we get from serving. Oftentimes we get so much more than we give when we're serving. The benefits are so much greater. I have gained so much more from this community in the time that I've been in service here. You guys have given me so much more. This community has given me so much more. I have been served by this community. It has been my honor to be on this journey with you, to be on this journey with this community for the last year as we move through transition and big changes. But the gift has been mine to me, that you have given to me. And so that's how we all become one, a part of the same community. We're all on the same path. We're all on the same team. We're moving in the same direction. We all have the same goals. We all are following the same vision, and that is God's vision. And that's why we've been doing so much visioning, because in visioning, we are opening ourselves up to what is God's vision for Creative Living Fellowship. And as we are tuned into what God's vision is, then we allow, what do I need to become? We allow God to become that in and through each and every one of us. And so that's how I have been served by this community, through the visioning and through the service, and being open to receive the gift of your love, the gift of your support, the gift of your service to me. That's what it has been. And so that's what oneness is all about. That's what unity is all about. No, we don't always agree on everything. That's what diversity is all about. We are all one, but we're not all the same. We are all a part of the one mind, but we all have our individual minds. We are all a part of the one life, but we have our individual lives. We are all a part of that something that is greater than any of us and all of us. Yet, we are all individual, unique, and God works through us according to our own uniqueness. We know this. And so tuning into that and being in that place of intention to serve, then we serve according to our own uniqueness. And we recognize that that presence in back of all things that is serving according to our own uniqueness. So my service is not going to look like yours. Your service is not going to look like mine. Because who's serving? God is serving however it wants to serve as each one of us. And so that's how it works. And that's why it's so important to really look at those things that we're passionate about, those things that make us come alive, because that's what makes us unique also. It reminds me of I think I told you this story before about a woman that I did not know when I lived in California, who passed away, and I did a memorial service for her. Her friends decided to have a brunch in memory of her. And during her life, she was passionate about two things, about cooking and about flowers. She was renowned throughout the city for her cooking and for her garden. And she cooked for all of her friends. She cooked for a lot of people, and she gave flowers everywhere she went. Well, when they had this brunch, there were about 30 people who came together, and all of them thought that they were her best friend. All of them thought that they were her best friend. They didn't know each other, most of them didn't. And when they heard stories about her, and they were sharing throughout the time, they couldn't believe that they were all telling the same story. They were all talking about how special she made them feel when she cooked for them, how special she made them feel when she brought flowers to them, when she brought special gifts, but particularly floral arrangements that she would make. The different things that she did for each of them made them each feel special. That's why they all thought they were her best friend. And they realized this is the way she lived her life. This is what service is all about. This is the way she served her friends. This is the way she served that community. And people were you could feel the love in the room. You could feel the respect in the room. You could feel the admiration that they all had for her. But she was the one who always talked about the gift she got from her friends, the gift that she got from serving. Her friends were serving her by just eating her food and enjoying her food and thanking her and appreciating her. So service works both ways. It works both ways. It works both ways. The foundation of service is working on ourselves, because service will make you have to work on yourself. Because all kinds of stuff comes up. When we start serving in a community, all kinds of stuff comes up. And you know what? The place for us to go is not out there. The place for us to go is inward. That's the time for the inward journey. When stuff comes up, that's the time for us to look within, That's a time for us to work on ourselves. So service gives us opportunity to work on ourselves, yet service is the vehicle for us to work on ourselves. Because there are often times, and in many ways, that we wouldn't be working on ourselves if we were not serving, because certain things wouldn't come up, and so we wouldn't have the necessity to look at certain things, certain issues, certain challenges, certain traits that we may have, having to decide a different way that we're going to look at life, a different way that we're going to handle things. That's what service does for us. It's about so much more than helping. It's that which allows us to be in that place of oneness, is in that place of being open to that power and that presence that is always with us, that is always right where we are, that is always seeking expression in and through and as each one of us. It is that which opens our hearts and creates a space for love to express, which is always seeking expression also. And so I invite you to continue to open your heart, to continue to discover those things that make you come alive. Those things that make you come alive. What is it that makes you come alive? What is it that you feel like, as I said before, you cannot leave this planet without doing it? What is it that's really speaking to you? What is it that's really calling to you? That's the call of service. That's the call of God. That's the call of oneness. That's the call of love. And so I invite each of us to continue to open to the call, continue with our spiritual practice. You know, I always come back to spiritual practice because everything comes back to spiritual practice. Everything comes back to practice in the presence of God. Everything comes back to being that place and space to which God can operate, but we can't be that place and space unless we are connected with God. And we can't be connected if we are not spending that time courting the presence, being available to the presence, being awake, being aware, being open, and being surrendered. And that's something we have to do over and over and over again, continuing to say yes, continuing to say yes, continuing to say, use me. Don't do like I did and say, use me, but don't give me a church. Just say, use me, full stop. Use me, oh God, full stop. And then open your hearts and open your minds and open your entire being to that power and that presence that will use us in ways that we cannot even imagine, in ways that we can't even imagine. And that's how we get to be all that we were created to be. That's how we get to live that life that we were created to live. That's how we get to live that life that we didn't even know about, that we can't know about. Because if we can know it, we're limiting it. But God knows what it is. And so I invite you all to open up. I invite you all to really double down on your spiritual practice. I invite you all to release whatever it is you may be holding on to that would hold you back. I invite you all to do the forgiveness work that you need to do. I invite you all to do whatever is necessary, to make amends if you need to do whatever it is that's necessary for you to be open and available and that vehicle through which God can work, through which God can do whatever it is God wants to do. Service, passionate service. I invite you, engage in passionate service. If you don't know what your passion is, think about it, pray about it, vision about it. Do whatever it is that you need to do to discover what it is that floats your boat. Let's turn within. Let's take a breath together. We just move into that place now of just knowing and sensing and feeling the presence of God right here, right now, right where we are. Just knowing that there is but one presence, there is but one power, there is but one mind, there is but one breath, there is but one life, that is God. That's what I choose to call it, but by any other name or no name at all. It's the same thing. It's the source of our being. This one is my life. This one is the life of each of us here this day. This life is that within which I live and I move and I have my being, and it lives and moves and has its being in me, in each of us. And so it is from this place that I speak the word for all of us this day. I speak the word of openness and surrender. I speak the word of releasing and letting go. I speak the word of availability to that power and that presence known as God. I speak the word of availability to the awareness of our passion and our passion to serve and to move forward from this place in service of God, in service of each other, in service of ourselves, in service to the world. And so in this time of celebration of Memorial Day and those who have given their lives in service, I speak the word for those of us who are still here to be willing to die to service, to die to something that is greater, to let go of the smallness and open ourselves up to the greater. And as we do that, all of the love and the peace and the joy and the harmony and the balance, all of the qualities of God come springing forth from us to serve the world. How awesome is that? And so as I open the circle of prayer, I'll pause momentarily so that you may speak the names of anyone you'd like held in prayer this day. You may speak their names silently, but you may speak them now. And so for all those whose names were spoken here this day, I know that God is right where each of them is, blessing and keeping them. This prayer goes out to anyone on this planet needing a prayer this day. I know that in the midst of every situation and circumstance, God is. God is. God is. And that's all we ever need to know, that God is. Thank you, Father, Mother God. Thank you, Divine Intelligence. Thank you, Infinite Presence. I'll just allow it to be now. And so it is.